Rapelang, you are clearly a disruptor. You haven't followed the typical rules when it comes to your entrepreneurial journey or even in your career by not stepping into the corporate world too early. Give us a sense of your understanding of being a disruptor. Has it always been something that you associate with?
I definitely didn't set out to be a disruptor. I think for me, I came from a different perspective where I believed, or I think you've got to start from a place where you have a conviction about believing that things should be a different way. And I think that's the premise of where you decide to change and disrupt something. Steve Jobs has a powerful quote that he says, everything around you that you call life was made up by people no smarter than you. And for me, when I had that realization coming out of university, I was like, well, if everyone is sort of making it up as they go along and the world is created by other people, I might as well create a concept of the world that I like, that I can relate to. And that was the basis of my understanding. And that's really what led to more sort of innovative products. It's like, okay, then what's interesting and meaningful to us? So we started with our first mobile VoIP-based applications and now doing smart learning apps for universities and corporates.
Let's talk about the smart learning app, Rekindle Learning.
Yes.
And I understand that for corporates as well, you've seen a resounding level of success. How easy is it to disrupt typical education and training platforms as we know them?
It's never easy at all, because there's so much market education that needs to happen for a customer to really get to a point where they're comfortable to buy into this new technology, and that can take a really long time. So timing is probably the toughest sort of period, when you've got to be patient and wait for people to come. And now, sort of 2 years, 3 years in, now I'm getting calls from the first people I met 3 years ago that are now ready to have the conversation. So you've got to find the right target or client who's ready to move fast, and the early adopters are not that easy to find.
It's interesting you mention that, because one would assume as well that when you do want to disrupt things, you wouldn't automatically have this ecosystem of support. Is that typically what happens?
Definitely not. And the ecosystem of support doesn't exist that strongly. And I think South Africa in general is probably a semi-oligopolistic, monopolistic market. Because if you look at even the US, where 20 years ago, the top 100 companies that existed then, only a small percentage of them are still listed and big now. Whereas in South Africa, the top 100 companies 20 years ago are still dominating the market. So we know that things don't move, things don't shift very easily here. And that's part of the challenge when you're trying to do innovative stuff, is that the market is quite hard to break into.
So how do you influence that? How do you change that, especially given that you interact with young global leaders like yourself through the World Economic Forum, who might have a vision to disrupt, but the environment isn't easy or comfortable?
You got to start by looking for like-minded people. So it's not even about the company anymore. You've got to find that one like-minded person in the organization that wants to see a different world and different perspective in that company. And that's the one you've got to work with. So it really comes down to that relationship. And often through the networks like the World Economic Forum or elsewhere, you can find some of those people that are looking for different things. And then they might be able to help you understand or contextualize what goes on in that organization to help you navigate it. So you do need that kind of internal insight or relationship or champion to help you through.
Does disruption have to come at a cost? Cost of self, cost of time, cost of relationships at times?
I think anything worthwhile will come at a cost. Certainly it will. I think I've had to prioritize my businesses for the vast majority of my life. And to me, it was a very conscious decision that I'm happy to do this, because at some point I will make a decision not to prioritize it and to prioritize something else. So I've never tried to have a balanced life my whole sort of 10, 12 years in the game. It was, this is what I want to do now because this is what gives me the greatest joy. Other things will give me greater joy at a later point, and then I can change. I'm not going to try and do it all together, because you can't. I'm not trying to be a superwoman. There's something I can do well right now, and that's what I can do well.
Exactly. I'm going to take advantage of the point that you mentioned, superwoman, and get a view of your thoughts when it comes to gender parity, more women being disruptors and leading the charge, especially in the STEM industry, STEM space. That you obviously work in.
I think it's often tougher for women, just because I think we have to develop our self-trust a lot better. It's often easier if you're in a world where the other people around you can affirm who you are already, which would obviously happen naturally for a guy if they have people that are like them, that they can relate to.
Their egos are big enough anyway. So.
Yeah, so it's easier at a subconscious level, because you're already being affirmed by what is happening externally to you. So for a woman, I think you need a much stronger internal anchor, because in the absence of those external affirmations, you've got to be able to make your own choice regardless of what's happening around you. And that's probably, I think, the toughest part. Everything else, we have the skills, we have the intelligence, there's nothing else stopping us but us developing our own sort of self-trust to go with that process, and believe that your world perspective is valuable and legitimate and can can actually add value in business today.
Sure, that's a powerful contribution that you're adding there to the conversation.
Sure.
You've also moved into the venture capitalist space, Nisela Capital. So being an entrepreneur who's had the experience of actually sharing your proposals and getting funding, what are you looking to learn, grow and develop and disrupt by being part of Nisela Capital?
Given the 12 years I've been in the space, I don't believe that venture capital or funding for early stage entrepreneurs, particularly in the tech space, has changed very much. So instead of complaining, which I've done for the last 12 years, I've decided let me try and understand what kind of happens on the other side so that I can really understand the investor perspective and be able to come up with a different model or something that would make investing in early stage tech businesses more viable for a wider range of investors. And I think we've got to straddle both sides. If you look at the most developed venture capital markets, whether it's Silicon Valley or Israel, the people on the investor side have often been on the other side. They're second and third generation entrepreneurs. And that's why they can understand how to bridge that gap a lot better. And they have also been entrepreneurs in the tech space, whereas most people that have made money on this continent have done it in traditional industries, manufacturing, property, mining. It's very hard to switch your core competence and feel comfortable and invest in an early stage business in a totally different sort of industry. Sure. So I think we've got to start building those bridges ourselves, and this is sort of my small part, and hopefully in a few years I'll get an idea about what I think could work.
Let's fast track to the next few years and what your plans are for future disruption, not only from a South African or African perspective, but globally as well.
So I think one of my favorite sort of research areas is really on how we develop people. So a lot of the things that we are doing with Rekindle Learning are a lot still driven around content-driven learning, packaging content in more enticing ways. But I believe that the next frontier of learning is really about shifting mindsets. And we haven't been able to really articulate how well that is done in technology. We can do it in small contexts at a top business school with some top lecturers, but we don't really know how to package a learning experience on a technology platform that can actually help people develop the responsiveness to the tasks and challenges that they face in the world around them. And that, I think, is one of the toughest things that we'll have to tackle for this continent. And that's, big research area for me, and I hope one day I'll get a brainwave about that.
All the best, and we look forward to the developments that you make as a disruptor.
Thank you so much for having me, Gugu.